Hello and welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast, brought to you by Rent All Street, KTM Racing and Fly Racing. On today's podcast, we've got our traditional post-Grand Prix questions and answer show from our patrons. So check out patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast to be able to give your feedback on the Solidarity Grand Prix. And David, I'm sure after the Solidarity Grand Prix, you're looking forward to the Solitude Grand Prix and a little bit of David time for the next wee while.
Yes, indeed. Yes, very much looking forward to not speaking to people and just, apart from my wife, I'm very much looking forward to that. It's been just a really, really long year. And I noticed sort of like by the end, because like on Sunday night, I was really quite sick and I'm still slowly getting sort of like recovering from it. So, very much time for some downtime.
Yeah, I remember in 2015 at Valencia, I got very sick by the end of the season. And sometimes the flyaways take it out of you. Sometimes it's just the volume of work. And then other times it's food poisoning like Valencia 2018. But Adam, I want to come to you next because we've got Adam Wheeler as ever on the podcast, but we've got a much more important Wheeler coming on at the end of the show as well, Ad.
Yes, well, due to sort of the marriage customs in Spain, she's not a wheeler, but my wife, who's the senior brand manager for Dorna, we'll be talking about the whole new visual identity for MotoGP, and it's obviously a subject that caused quite a bit of discussion when it was unveiled on Sunday evening. But Dave and I, interviewed Nuria for a good sort of like 15-20 minutes about the whole reason and motivation behind that. So that'll be coming up later in the podcast. But Steve, can I just mention as well that I think most Grand Prix are about solitude for Dave. I mean, I think, the illness was even perhaps a little bit forced. There was a bit of exaggerated coughing going on, so you wouldn't have to.
I'm very sick. Don't you know I'm very sick?
So that was it was one obstacle. But no, Dave, you looked, I don't think I've ever seen you looking quite so poorly. I think it was on the Saturday. So it was good to have you back functioning on race day.
Yes, exactly. And especially for the test, I was glad to be sort of like in decent shape for the test, but I did basically just spend most of, I think I went to bed at about sort of 8 and didn't get out of bed on Sunday night and didn't get out of bed until about 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon.
That sounds like Neil's plan for today, actually. That's why Neil's not here. We're recording this at what, 2 o'clock? So we'll blame Neil on the same thing, but I didn't hear any coughing from him at all. I just heard he just didn't want to do it. But David, you mentioned about you didn't want to talk to people over the course of the winter. The one thing that we have seen over the course of the last few months is you talk to everyone on the Discord channel. You're very active on that. And we've been able to really use that over the course of the last couple of months to be able to get a lot of really good questions for the podcast, but as much as anything else, to build a really good connection with our patrons. So check out patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast to sign up for that. We also have polls all the way through Grand Prix weekends for rider of the Grand Prix and some other polls as well. So check that all out on Patreon. Jorge Martin very comfortably won our rider of the Solidarity Grand Prix. I nearly said the Solitude Grand Prix there, Dave. And he won that with 39% of the vote compared to Pecco with 28%. So those two riders separated themselves from everyone else. And Ben Butler said that he voted for Jorge despite the championship celebrations. And we had it from a lot of other listeners. Paul was saying, how can it be anybody other than Martin? Stephen was saying, I voted for Jorge just because he didn't throw it away. And TV Rumor Coon said it was a hard choice. Pecco won both races. Martin won the title. But David Alonso was David Alonso. So I was tempted for him. But in the end, she was the lone voter that went for Aleix because she's a romantic at heart. So we had a lot of variety on that. Lots of good comments. Check that all out on Patreon. We also had a comment section for all of our patrons just to give us their thoughts on Jorge Martin and his season as a whole. And we had a lot of variety in this. We had some people full of praise for Martin. We had some people were a little bit cautious about being too in on Martin's success. And I thought it was interesting that Rob said that there'll always be an asterisk beside this championship. It'll remind him a little bit of Kevin Schwantz winning in 93 or Crivier winning in 99. The mistakes all added up.
Boo. Boo.
Sorry. Don't disagree with that, Rob.
Yeah.
I would disagree with it as well. I think especially over the course of the fact that we've got sprints and Grand Prix now, you've got 40 races, a deserving champion comes out at the end of the day. And I think that's probably been the big thing that we've heard from a lot of people inside the paddock about it. And from a lot of our patrons as well. Tim was saying that Jorge used his full potential to win, and that consistency was the key. And for Jesse, it was a well-earned championship, well-deserved for Martin. Both riders rode at an incredible level, and it was impressive to see Martin learn from all the frustrations of last year and then also how to improve on those and find the consistency. One of the other things that Jesse mentioned was that for a rider with such a macho demeanor, it was always interesting to hear Martin talk about the mental side of things and the lessons he's learned and the challenges that he's faced as well. So I thought that was an interesting comment. And then we had plenty of others coming through to say that Pecco winning so many races was impressive, but also just making too many mistakes. So Martin scored the most points, deserving champion. That seemed to be the overall consensus from everyone on Patreon, and Adam, probably everyone in the media centre as much as anything else.
Yeah, that's right, Steve. Goodness, pick what you want out of Jorge Martin's championship, but I think the thing that stands out for me the most is from Thailand, Malaysia, Barcelona. I mean, those 3 rounds just highlighted everything, that was strong about his championship, being able to perform under pressure, being able to push limits where perhaps he maybe would have crashed in 2023 and in 2022 when he was struggling more with the bike. I thought those 3 rounds just summed up everything about it. I mean, yeah, Bagnaia had better speed, and, Pecco's season as well, I think, was also triumphant in one aspect. But Martin really had, he basically brought the correct strategy to put the whole thing in his pocket.
Yeah, I mean, like, you win your championship on your bad days, and Jorge Martin had so many fewer bad days. He just finished. I think Pecco said it himself. He finished second so many times, and finishing second so many times it really is the difference. Martin outscored Pecco by 43 points on Saturday and gave away 33 points on Sunday, and that was the difference in the end. Like, he was good enough on. He was basically not as bad as he was not as bad on Sunday as Pecco was on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big things that we saw as well. Actually, on our Discord channel, we have a stats group as well, and everyone's always quite keen to come up with something that's going to give you a little bit of insight. The big one from the last couple of days was Martin outscored Pecco by 33 points over the Sundays, so it shows the progress that he made in the
Steve,
Grand Prix as well.
That's not actually a channel or community. It's just Dave with a load of pseudonyms talking to himself.
I tell you what, Dave's done a good job of being able to create all those dummy accounts and robot accounts. So it's a pretty solid effort in farming there, Dave.
It's nice to have some friends.
Well, let's get kicked off into our questions from the week as well. And so our patrons have given these questions, and we're going to start off with some Jorge Martin questions. And Scooter Trash has asked, can we get David's opinion on the Martinators title celebrations?
Well, I mean, it would be nice if they had a sort of one which lasted less than about 3/4 of an hour. They do seem to be having a competition for who can have the most grandiose and longest celebration. To be honest, I quite like the concept behind it, but it takes so bloody long to actually put it all together. And I think especially. And I wouldn't mind so much if it wasn't the last race of the season. I think, when you wrap up the championship, sort of, I don't know, say with 3 or 4 rounds to go, then it's a lot less. Then it doesn't impose quite so much. It's when you wrap it up at the last race, and there's so much emotion, there's so much going on, especially in the last race. It's such an enormous release that to go through such a intensely choreographed sort of showpiece it is a little bit tiresome. But whatever I thought of it, it's never going to be anywhere near as bad as Valentino Rossi's title that he won in Japan with the mayor of Tavullia or something, and getting paperwork done and all the rest of it. I think that's really stands. Rossi had some fantastic celebrations. That was not one of them.
I thought I like the theatricality of it. I mean, I've kind of gone on public record by saying I hate the Martinator moniker, and Jorge Martin went full in. I mean, he might actually be half a cyborg for all we know.
The leathers were great, though. I mean, like,
Yeah.
the leathers were just fantastic.
Yeah, Alpinestars made a big effort. And I think you can actually get the boots. There's like a limited edition series of the boots. I saw a press release about that. So it's full marks for effort. One of my favorite celebrations is it's nothing to do with the title, but Jorge Lorenzo deciding to jump into the lake at Jerez. It seemed very kind of improvised, even if he had been planning it maybe for weeks. Yeah, nearly drowned. But there was something just like, again, full send about it. But yeah, it's. I get Dave's point. It is quite drawn out, and that's why I think you have to give extra credit to Pecco Bagnaia for his decorum and his patience in Parc Ferme. Dealing with the whole scenario of losing the championship, even though he'd been perfect all through the weekend in Barcelona. But yeah, I just like kind of manic scenes and ticker tape and stuff like that, and making a big mess. I mean, obviously, because it was called the Solidarity Grand Prix of Barcelona, there was a certain tone to it, a certain kind of reflection and reverence to the situation in Valencia. So I don't think there was a theme of wanting to go too much over the top, but fair enough. And the big question is, I don't really think Jorge Martin is going to be back as the Terminator. Certainly, probably not in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where championship celebrations are always a bit risky. And like for me, I think that you should be going all in, regardless of the fact that it's the Solidarity Grand Prix. You're doing it, there's a lot of connotations with Valencia for it. But this could also be the only time Jorge Martin wins the MotoGP World Championship. And I remember when Alvaro Diaz won the Supersport 300 Championship, it was the day after Victor Steeman had died. And he decided to not do any championship celebrations, and he wanted to show respect for a rival. And Alvaro Diaz isn't racing anywhere really at the minute. He came back for a few races this year in Supersport, but that could be the last time that we see him as a front-running rider for his whole career. And he doesn't have the championship celebration to show for it. And fair enough, you want to make sure that you're showing respect to your rival, but you also have to have that moment for yourself as well. And I thought it was good that Martin was able to find a bit of a balance for it as well, which was good.
Yeah, but it's just a shame that history tends to forget context, Steve.
Yeah.
But in terms of being the Instagram generation, I mean, Jorge Martin provided those kind of 10, 20-second clips that will probably, reverberate for a few years at least.
Adam, you mentioned that we're probably not going to see the Martinator and Terminator mode next year. That brings us to a question that Marcus asked us, and he's asked, how many races do we think Martin could win next year with the Aprilia? And I'd also like to say it's worth remembering that a year ago, everybody thought the Aprilia was the coming bike in MotoGP.
Yeah.
It had even challenged for a championship with Aleix. The GP24 has obviously kicked the game on, but Aprilia wasn't that far behind as recently as a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Maverick managed to win on it. Aleix managed to win a couple of, has been successful. I think I would not be surprised if Martin managed to win, shall we say, 2 or 3 races next year. The problem with the Aprilia is that although it can be very, very good, there's a lot of times when it's just not as consistent, and it's the consistency which has really killed it. But I mean, there's there's no doubt that Jorge Martin is a better rider than Maverick Vinales or Aleix Espargaro. So it's going to be better than he's going to be better than those two were. I think Bezzecchi looks really comfortable as well. Just looked really good on the bike. So I think there is hope that they will have a decent season next year.
I mean, Maverick was saying that he wanted the 23 RSGP with a more starting potential. So that was kind of his summary of the 2024 season. And if Aprilia can bring some of the strengths of the 23, to suit Jorge Martin with some of the kind of developments of the 24 and a bike that can start a bit better, then, it could be a positive kind of mix for Martin, but they don't really have much time to get that all in place for Sepang. And another thing as well is that something we've seen consistently over the last couple of seasons is that the Aprilia, it seems to drop off in the second half of the season. And Viñales again was saying this. I mean, he's had a couple of years of experience of that now. When you get into sort of the really heavy congestion of the fixtures in the second sort of phase of MotoGP, then there's something about the Aprilia system or the team or the motorcycles that just doesn't quite last the pace in terms of making that consistency for the championship. So, but I agree, Steve, with Dave. I think you'll see Martin 2 or 3 races, maybe on some of the faster. Some of the tracks with faster turning, corners or layouts that might benefit the whole package a bit more.
Yeah, and obviously enough we questions in about the Aprilia package for Jorge Martin. And David, one of the questions we had was from Eric Harvey, just actually about the starts for Aprilia and what can Aprilia do to sort out their starting problem.
Yeah, I mean, the starts have become such an important part of MotoGP now because of the difficulty of passing and so many other things. The issue seems to be partly electronics and partly the clutch. Certainly, Maverick Vinales has been complaining about the clutch, pretty much all season. Getting it perfectly right. What they like to do is use a carbon clutch, but the downside of a carbon clutch, or the upside of a carbon clutch, is less spinning mass, so it actually makes the bike more maneuverable. But it is it's much more tricky material. It doesn't have the feel that the normal steel and fiber clutch plates have, and so that is getting that right is going to be important. But also electronics. So much of it is about electronics. Is about converting that into converting the horsepower into drive, and I think also its engine character as well. The engine character of the Aprilia is quite peaky, so it doesn't have the sort of mid-range and torque that the Ducatis have. For example, the KTM also seems to have, and I think that's where they need to improve if they're going to improve their starts.
Also, it's worth remembering for people that are looking closely at Jorge Martin next season that there's different levels of progression and storytelling going on here. I mean, Martin is not been signed to win the 2025 title outright. I mean, they've invested in him. This could be like a 2 to 3 year project where he brings the whole thing up to a level where they're challenging Ducatis. People also need to look at how much progress Yamaha will make. Honda are pretty much at the back of the grid now. Can they make progress? And KTM as well just might need 1 or 2 tweaks to figure out the Michelin equation, Steve. But I think you can't sort of. Martin might have a freak result, a bit like Vinales in the first sort of third of the year, but then you just need to see how much he's progressing with the RSGP to make any kind of judgments thereafter.
Yeah, I always think it's worth during the course of races keep an eye on the percentage difference rather than where people are qualifying, and that can be percentage to pole, percentage to winning margin, and then you're able to see the progress. That was one of the things that for the WC or the Women's Championship this year I had to do a lot of, because you have big gaps and you're looking at it thinking, right, how's this actually equating out to progress? And you were able to actually see, okay, well, she's found XYZ, and then that the progress is there. I think that for Martin and Aprilia, that could be an interesting metric to use for them as well. But we had a question in from David Fields as well about the championship, and given that Pecco won so many races this year, is the extra 5 points from first to second sufficient, or should it be a little bit more? Should it be a 7-point differential that would suddenly make it where you're more inclined to go a little bit more to try and win a race?
No, the point scoring in MotoGP is pretty much perfect. I do think the sprint races complicate it a little bit because the points difference in the sprint races is so much lower. And to be honest, I don't think there's a very good balance. But I mean, the thing is, Grand Prix motorcycle racing, not MotoGP, but Grand Prix motorcycle racing has played around with the points in the past, and it's gone backwards. It's gone backwards and forwards. They've changed things, and they've always ended up back with this system. And I think that the gap of 5 points for a win is big enough that it is absolutely worth trying to win the race.
Yeah.
Whereas sort of further down the field, what you don't want is people taking massive risks for 7th place. And so but you should be laying it all on the line to take a win rather than a second, or to take a third, a third rather than a fourth, or a second rather than a third. So I like the points. I think it also represents, because you can't really look back at any championship and think the wrong person won that. Like Nicky Hayden only won 2 races in his championship year, but he was so consistent. He was so good. He absolutely deserved that over Valentino Rossi, even though Valentino Rossi won more races. Hayden put in the work, scored the points, got the championship, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to compare to Superbikes as well for the Superpole race, because obviously Superbikes is different kettle of fish compared to GP. GP has the fact that it's a Grand Prix and there's a lot of different things that historically go into that. I like the fact that in the Superpole race, there's a bit of jeopardy. You have to finish inside the top 9 to keep your top 3 rows of the grid. You've got a benefit to try and attack, particularly for that 9th position, to move yourself from maybe the 5th row of the grid onto the 3rd row of the grid. That can have a big impact for your whole weekend. I think the fact that we keep the same qualifying positions means that the benefits of it are probably outweighed a little bit.
Yeah, and absolutely. The proof is in the pudding, because it's gone. How many times has it gone down to Valencia into the last race? Quite frequently, it feels. And also, I think Dave's absolutely right. You have to reward victory. There has to be some sort of differentiation there. And I also like the fact that the points only go down to the 15th place, because we shouldn't be sort of giving out points willy-nilly. You have to earn them, and do not touch them. It's a good system.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Let's move on to probably the biggest talking point from the test was all about Marc Marquez getting onto that factory Ducati. But Adam asked us a question as to whether or not Marc exceeded or met his expectations for this season. And I think it's quite interesting, because coming into the season, David, we all thought Marc should be able to win the championship. He's going to contend. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And he won some races. He was really quick. But the fact is the GP24 just outgunned the 23. But for you, when you look at Marc's season, was it what you expected?
I mean, like, at the start of the season, I really thought he could win the championship, but I mean, that was more of a lack of understanding on my part on how much better the GP24 was over the GP23. And if it looked like, looking back from in hindsight, then you would have to say that Marc Marquez definitely met expectations. If you like, he's sort of at the upper end of meeting expectations. He beat 2 riders on GP24s. He won races. He made life difficult for the 2 championship contenders, who were so much better than everyone else. And he was clearly doing so on inferior machinery. So I think we saw what Marc Marquez was capable of. It took him maybe 7-8 races to actually figure out all the little finesses of the Ducati and to establish that communication. And yeah, I think he, like I say, upper end of the he met expectations. He met the upper end of expectations.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a very Marc Marquez season, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah, 100%.
He was amazing in certain places. He crashed on, inexplicably in others. He was frequently the only one that could get in amidst the championship dispute with riders, like they've said, on superior machinery. And it pretty much, ticked his box for 2024. And that was like a transition phase to arguably a better situation. Well, I mean, we don't know how much more money he's earning as a factory Ducati rider, if that was even 1% of his agenda for 2025, but he's certainly in the right environment, the same way that he kind of engineered and plotted a route to Repsol Honda back in 2013. He's now in sort of the title winning and dominant team. So it's Ducati Lenovo is arguably the place where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, that he was very clear about his goal. His goal was to be able to be in a position to be able to have his pick and to be able to pick and choose his next team. Whether that might even have been Garcia under the right conditions, but he wanted to win races and contend for a championship in 2025. So by that standard, he's done exactly the right thing. He's met all his goals.
Yeah, and as Adam said, he ticked all the boxes. And if you want to tick the boxes on Renthal, to go to Renthal Street's account, you're able to use the Fit My Bike tool to select all of the options available for your make and model of motorcycle. Next question comes in, and it's from VJ, and it's about how long do we think Pecco can play the clean game with Marc as his teammate? And Adam, I want to bring this one to you, because you've obviously spent a lot of time interviewing Pecco over the course of the last couple of years. He's always been very straight about the fact that he's a clean rider. Marc is unlike anyone else for being able to get under your skin, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, one thing I think you have to praise Bagnaia for is his transparency. I mean, whether he's on the podium telling Italian fans to calm down, booing, Marquez when he was a clear and deserved winner, or, his very classy congratulations to, an intense rival like we saw in Barcelona. in press conferences as well prior to the championship runnings, he was saying, that it's not my style. I don't need to sort of hold things up. And I think Neil was actually quite sort of judgmental, about him on this, saying that he could have perhaps resorted a little bit more to the dark arts to put things into his favour. But Bagnaia obviously came into the final Grand Prix with a strategy like, I'm going to win, I'm going to go as fast as I possibly can, and then see what happens. And that's what did happen. But I think if there is going to be any kind of shithousery or some mind games, then they're probably more likely to come from Mark. I mean, don't forget as well that
Probably.
Mark is... Yeah, well, he's coming into Bagnaia's territory. I mean, he's the one that's coming into that team.
Yeah.
So there's a lot for him to do, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to take him about 10 minutes to mess everyone up. So, yeah, of course he's going to do that. That's his approach. He's always been, if you win off the track, then that gives you an advantage on track. And that's very much, that's his MO.
I think Bagnaia can be a mean motherfucker if he has to be. And we've seen that he's not scared to make some tough moves. But I think his general MO is generally to just focus pretty much on himself and what he can do. But I don't know, if they start hitting each other, it could be I don't know, kind of very gossipy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, Dorna really need to release the footage that we know exists of Mark and Pecco having a very polite but firm discussion after their collision in Portimao. Yes, so release the footage.
One thing about Mark, and it brings us nicely into a question from Racing Armchair, is the loyalty that he creates around him. And obviously you get that loyalty from the fact that you're the best MotoGP rider of all time and you're able to do things that other riders can't do. But it brings us to Racing Armchair's question of why didn't Frankie Carcetti go with Mark to the factory team? And they've said that they don't want a political answer. They want the real answer, Dave. So can they handle the truth?
I don't know. But I mean, I don't know the real answer, so I'm going to give you the answer that I think. And what I think is that Mark wasn't in a position to choose. He didn't have the bargaining strength that he might have otherwise. Also, I think he doesn't really care. He just wants to be in the factory team with the right bike to be able and the right tools. We don't know whether Frankie Carcetti wanted to go to the factory team because the factory team is a very high pressure cooker environment. It's not a very pleasant place to work. It's not the same sort of family atmosphere. There are different challenges. I don't know whether Carcetti wanted to go. I don't know whether Mark wanted Carcetti to go with him. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know. We're not going to find out.
And also, don't forget that Mark is going into the factory team. He's not creating his own little element of the factory team. He had to accept that. And Marco Rigamonti seems to be extremely well respected and installed in that setup. Dave's spot on. There was not really the possibility for Frankie to move. And, while they had a good season together, maybe it's not really kind of the Santi Hernandez link up that proved to be so sort of ironclad and successful in the past.
TV Room Raccoon has asked us, Dave, what version of the GP24 will Morbidelli, Aldeguer and Alex Marquez be riding next year? Is it going to be the end of season spec, or is it going to be similar to what we saw this year with GP23 and an earlier season spec?
Well, I was looking at some photos, and in fact, a friend of photographer, Nikki Kovac, told me that she'd asked some of the Ducati engineers, and basically the GP24s that, for example, Fermin Aldeguer was riding was a completely new bike, in the sense that it was completely, built completely new. It wasn't wheeled out of one of the other garages. So I suspect that what it will be, and trying to see the aero that's being used and all the other bits and pieces, it looks like being sort of the second half of the season spec. So not the Barcelona Solidarity spec, but one from after the summer break. It's going to be up to date. It's going to be good. It's going to be entirely possible, but I don't know whether it's going to be. It's not going to be the bike that Martin and Bagnaia just got off of.
Yeah. And Fly Racing Sports Podcast as well, once again this year. So check out flyracing.com for a lot of streetwear and gear as well. Adam's rocking the t-shirt. And I have to say, the t-shirts are very durable. I've had one for a couple of years that's still going strong. So they're a good effort. But gloves, helmets, jackets, they've got it all. So check out flyracing.com. Our next question comes in from Martin Darlington, and Darlow's asked a few different parts to his questions that we've already answered, but I thought one part was really interesting, and Adam, I'll come to you about this one. Davide Tardozzi on Sunday, it sounded like he was quite spiky in his interviews at the end of the race. Was that a case of just when you read the text, it looks quite bad, or was he really just trying to get the knife into Aprilia when he said Aprilia wanted to buy the number one plate, but now let's see if they can keep it?
Well, Tardozzi's a little bit of a cartoon character. I mean, he's fashioned this persona, and I think MotoGP should be thankful for it. I think F1 has had a couple of equivalents. He's not exactly shy with his opinions, and I think Ducati maybe needs someone like that. I mean, his passion is evident through his celebrations or his general demeanor, the way he patrols up and down pit lane. I mean, there's plenty of kind of memes of him. I don't think it was quite as malicious as it comes across in the comments. It's more kind of playful rivalry. But I think Tardozzi has no problem embracing that kind of spiky exterior.
David, we have a question in as well. This question came in from Freak about... Freak. There you go. About Moto3 riders making the transition to Moto2. And they've asked for our resident Moto3 expert, which obviously Neil isn't on the pod, but he wasn't going to be our resident Moto3 expert anyway. It's all about you with the introductory class. And what about moving to the intermediate class for the likes of Alonso Halgado, Colin Vire, and Ivor Ortola? Who's going to make the best transition to Moto2 machinery? And who do you think is more likely to be like Izan Guevara in their transition from Moto3 to Moto2?
I mean, that's one of these questions which is just really difficult to say because it is such a difficult transition. I think Alonso has his size and weight against him. He is quite small, he's quite light. Vire has a bit more of an advantage. I think Holgado is a little bit taller as well. That's going to help. But then I think that... honestly, it's just really difficult. It's really difficult to say. If you look at they are currently, as we speak, riding around Jerez, and the times are all pretty close. They're all within a couple of tenths of each other, and they're all very respectable. So they're doing what they need to do. I actually think there isn't one of them among them that I think is not going to successfully make the transition. And if Alonso makes the transition, what he did in Moto3 was so special that I think if he successfully makes the transition to Moto2, then he's going to be really special there too.
I think it's also a question of mentality. And, Izan Guevara, as we've seen, has had a very slow start to life in Moto2. We can't forget that these are very young people. They don't quite have the maturity to take on the next challenge, and that's where it's so important to have the right people around you to say, "Listen, keep realistic, keep your feet on the ground." All the other cliches. I think this is where Guevara maybe took things a little bit less seriously than he needed to. David Alonso, the talent and the head in terms of having everything screwed on and what he needs to do is evidently there. I think that's something we need to watch out for. But also Vire is extremely promising. I think the Netherlands and all the fans and the media deservedly get excited about him because from what we've seen so far, he does have those ingredients. Ortola maybe could be the sort of the slightly wild card element in that, Steve. But it'll be fascinating to see who sort of gets the grasp of that first early taste of electronics, that extra power, and then of course, the different kind of racecraft necessary for Moto2.
Yeah, the journalists, the media, the Dutch, and in that Venn diagram, there's Dave right in the middle there, mixing them all together. I think one of the things that's always worth taking note whenever you see riders transition from Moto3 to Moto2. I was told this years ago by a team manager in Moto2. He said the first test when you see them, see who's immediately throwing the bike away from them on the run in towards the last corner to red. If you're still doing that, you're still riding like a Moto3 bike. If you're smoother, you've figured out how to transition into that bigger class of bike. And I think one of the biggest things, and I've always said this, it's great in CEV as it was, Junior GP as it is now, that you're able to spend all that time on a Moto3 machine. You're able to build your experience up. You're able to do all these things. But the problem with that as well is you can spend 6 or 7 years on a Moto3 bike and never learn and transition on to the next. That's where someone like Aldeguer is actually a good example of the other end of the spectrum because he didn't have the money to go Moto3 racing. So he had to start Stock 600, European Moto2, and then he was into the World Championship on Moto2. But he had all that experience on a Moto2 bike that now he's, 19? And he's on a MotoGP bike. So it's things like that that are quite impressive to be able to see how riders are able to learn and evolve.
Steve, don't you think that's cool though that you can get directly in through Moto2 and you don't have to go through Moto3 these days?
Yeah.
I mean, Senna Agius, I mean, Sam Lowe's, Augusto Fernandez. There's plenty of examples.
It's really important to be able to do that, because what we've seen is Moto3 is a great way to be able to diagnose and look at riders and say they're talented, but can they actually become MotoGP riders? And sure enough, some do, but an awful lot don't. And I think that's where being able to learn on the Moto2 bike comes in really useful. And that's where I hate the fact that we don't have stock 600 in World Superbikes anymore, because it's so important to be able to use that to give riders that time and experience.
Adrian Huertas is on a Moto2 bike. Now, I find that quite interesting. And he's lapping pretty well at the moment. He's not far off of on-choose times. Again, this is a really weird sort of like circuitous route for him to come into Moto2. But I mean, like, how do you think Huertas is going to do? He's got experience on a bigger bike. He's got experience on the Pirellis. Steve?
I think Huertas is going to do really well because he's a good rider, and he's a guy that was able to race in Red Bull rookies. He had top fives in Red Bull rookies, so we knew he was good from an early age, but he just had no money. So he couldn't go down the Moto3 route. He had to go down the 300 routes. I think he raced a little bit in European Talent Cup, and then he went to 300s with very little experience and was immediately fast, immediately able to always be in that lead group. And then he transitioned onto a Supersport bike very well. I think that the easiest comparison between him and anyone else is Manu Gonzalez. Gonzalez finished third in the Moto2 World Championship. And that's where, like, I, obviously enough, because I'm working in the Superbike paddock and I'm in that paddock all the time, and I'm probably the only person that watches every minute of track action through the course of a season because I'm commentating on pretty much all of it. I think that 300 gets a very bad rap because of what it was like in those first few years. It is able to develop talent. It is able to find talent. It's able to give them experience, and then they're able to transition. But it's like any other class. You need that talent to be able to then move further. If you're in the Moto3 World Championship, chances are you're a pretty talented rider. You're going to be professional for your career. Whereas if you're in the 300 class, chances are you're just a good rider. You might be a national championship level rider that's being able to race at that World Championship, but Supersport you can't do. And I kind of look at Supersport 300 a little bit like I look at BSB, where the top 3 riders in 300s are able to go to Supersport and be competitive. The top probably 5 guys in Supersport are able to then be a Superbike rider. Same as in BSB, the top 2 or 3 guys are talented enough to go to World Superbikes, but then it's about the right opportunities. Whereas if you're coming from Moto3 into Moto2, chances are if you're in Moto2 and you're in the top 15, you're good enough to be a good Supersport rider. Locatelli's shown that, Cortese's shown that, Krummenacher showed it, all of those guys, but it's about trying to give you those little steps that you're able to make. And I think that for me, Huertas is going to go really well because I think he gets undersold for his intelligence, because I think he's a very savvy racer and he's shown that this year. And I think he's going to do a really good job. Maybe not next year, but it's about the next 2-3 years for him. And I think that at the end of the day, he's always going to have an opportunity to be on a Superbike. This was a great step for him. And I love whenever riders are brave, because Gonzalez was brave. And now we're seeing that with Huertas as well. Just to mention the Alpinestars Fantasy League as well. Danny 32 was our race winner in that. So Danny Team 32, our winner, and we never have to comment on this again as long as you get in contact with us and we're able to get you your Alpinestars package sent out straight away. And then we'll just draw a line in the sand on the Alpinestars Fantasy League. I think one of the things that was quite interesting, Dave, was we did have a question in from someone that was finishing inside the top 10. I'm not going to name and shame them, but it was, what's my prize for finishing inside the top 10? And Dave, what's their prize for finishing inside the top 10?
An innate sense of pride and also a sense of shame at not having finished as first. There is, as the classic, as they say in the classic racing movie Talladega Nights, second is just first loser.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, KCPX, you should be ashamed of yourself finishing second in this league of 1,300 people. Absolutely shambolic.
Exactly.
But,
look at the 7 people ahead of you and work out where we're wrong.
I haven't mentioned who finished inside the top 10. KCPX finished second, 60 points down, and absolutely nowhere over the course of 20 race weekends. We got one question left to come in as well. Tim's asked us about the new logo. And
hang on, Steve, hang on. Give Dave his credit. Come on.
No.
Oh.
Fuck him. Tim's asked us about the new font and the new logo for MotoGP, and is there a name for that? And he also likes the alliteration of faster, forward, fearless. And I know that you guys talked a little bit about this on the pod after the Grand Prix. I have to say, when I saw the logo initially, I didn't really like it that much. But when I saw it with the graphics and all the package together, I think it works really well. And one of the things that came up on our Discord channel was the fact that you will be surprised at how quickly you look at the old one and think just how ancient it looks. And literally, from the moment I saw the new one, the old one looked very dated. And I think it's a really good step for MotoGP to make.
Yeah, I mean, you get this with TV with commentators as well. As soon as you have a new commentator,
Never change commentators, Dave.
Yeah. Everyone just sits there and complains about how terrible the new commentators are and how the old commentators were so much better. And then the next time they change commentators, you get exactly the same process where all of a sudden the new commentators have turned into the old commentators and have gone from being terrible to being brilliant. And it's the same with logos. For me, the advantage of not giving a shit about logos is that I don't really care. I think it's nice. I like the fact that that there's now going to be like a unified sort of image across all of the classes. That was the problem that they switched to MotoGP and then they changed the logo and then they went from 125s to Moto3 and 250s to Moto2 and they added Moto E and God knows what else. And so there just hasn't been a consistent image across all three classes or all of the brand really. So that's got to be good. Having a consistent message has got to be good. And I mean, the interview we did with Nuria was just absolutely fantastic and really clarified for me an awful lot, made me understand exactly what went into it, what's going into it, and why it happened.
Yeah, the logo is just part of the kind of overhaul, if you like, of the look of MotoGP. And having seen the process sort of over the last 2 years and how hard she's sort of worked on it and, collaborated with different kind of specialists on that look. I mean, by no means was it a Liberty Media thing. I mean, it was well in Genesis before Liberty Media sort of came to the meeting table, you can say, with Dorna. So it was something I think you have to give credit to people like, Carlos Espeleta for wanting to drag MotoGP a little bit further into sort of modern times. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, Dorna, up until now, doesn't really have like a marketing department. They certainly didn't have a branding department. And, there's just this kind of regeneration going on, if you like. I mean, just look at MotoGP in terms of promotion anyway. I mean, they're still doing some very archaic stuff. I mean, why do you have to have a French rider going to Moulin Rouge, 2 days before the Le Mans Grand Prix? How many people are actually waking up, seeing something maybe on local TV or on a website thinking, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to Le Mans this weekend? Because going to a Grand Prix,
tickets is sold out already.
Exactly. Well, it's an expensive affair, right? To go to a Grand Prix. Yeah. I mean, you can't just decide to take a family of four, impromptu, because it requires an investment of time and cash. And I think that promotion style is old-fashioned. I mean, you need to look at new ways. I mean, look at podcasting. I mean, the prevalence of podcasts now is huge. Instead of making riders go and pat a kangaroo at Phillip Island, maybe get them in some fancy hotel, get some podcasters, some YouTubers, give more video access. That's how you kind of build up promotion and an image around these signature events, and do it a lot earlier. It needs to be a month before the race.
So what you're saying, Ad, is that all of the top MotoGP riders should be made to come on the Paddock Pass podcast before every race.
In fairness, Adam's done a good job through the course this year to get us a lot of interviews.
I mean, we've had some amazing guests, and we've got some amazing guests coming. So
I don't know if we want our rivals to get the benefit that Adam's already given us, to be honest.
Well, and also, until we criticise them as losers in our winners and losers category, and then they never want anything else to do with us. Just blame it on Neil.
Yeah, he's not here. One thing that just before we queue up the interview with Nuria as well, we've set ourselves up on Blue Sky as well on social. So check out the Paddock Pass podcast there. Give us a follow. We're going to try and use that for a little bit more interaction as well in terms of what we're doing on social. We've obviously got Patreon. Check out patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast. Sign up for all the off-season content. I think we've put up 130 different bits and pieces on Patreon this year already. So for $108, 99 euros, it's pretty good value for the content that you're getting. So check that out on patreon.com/Paddock Pass Podcast. As ever, a big thank you to Renthal Street, Fly Racing, and KTM for supporting the podcast. But Adam, I'll let you cue up the interview.
Oh goodness, yeah, we managed to sort of put Nuria on the spot during the Barcelona Grand Prix weekend. Like I said, I kind of had to sort of coerce Dave into coming because he doesn't have much interest in logos and branding. But I think it was a little bit of an educational exercise.
It's fantastic. Genuinely, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. I mean, like, you know, look, Nuria is genuinely a lovely person, and it was lovely to talk to her, but she's also incredibly intelligent, and she was really good at explaining, like, why we are doing this. What is the point? And I learned so much, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody doing it in their third language as well. I think the important thing is, and the reason why it's in this podcast, is that a lot of people were saying, why are MotoGP changing? I like it, and there's no need to change, and whatever else. I mean, I think the interview will go towards explaining some of that rationale, and it's not just for us and our kind of secondhand knowledge. This is somebody directly responsible for it. Okay, we're in the circuit, the Barcelona Catalunya, and we've got a slightly special interview this time. Dave,
the specialist of special guests.
Yeah, well, normally, I mean, when I'm hosting these things, I tend to be directing things, and you know, I wouldn't say I'm a boss at all, but I'm definitely not the boss on this podcast.
No, 100% not. No.
And Nuria Garcia, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for letting us know a little bit about the new visual identity for MotoGP, because I almost had to pull David a little bit into this interview because, admittedly, we're not talking about tyres, we're not talking about motorcycles, we're not talking about rider psychology. We're talking about an area of MotoGP that's very new. I mean, for example, just first off, when was the logo type for itself? How old is that? It seems like it's been in place forever.
First of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know how I have been tricked into being here talking to you. I wasn't expecting that.
You said I do, my dear.
I will try to be as clear as possible. The first time the logo that we know, the current logo that has been around for a while, was made was 1999, I would say, and then it was. The checkered flag was rounded around 2007. So it hasn't changed for a while. Lots of things happen in between. New digital era and lots of products.
Social
media. And that was never treated within the MotoGP organization. So that was certainly, the brand happens no matter what. And this time, I think we were really conscious that we needed to do more, not only for the sport, but for the brand itself. Because
well, you've got a perspective on this, right? Because you've been in Dorna for a long time, so you've seen the evolution not only of the media landscape, but also the company and how everything's treated in that way.
That's right. Yes. That's. Exactly why I was telling you that the 2007, it's been a while and lots of things happen in between. I lived through all of this, and I can say that we are very conscious of we need to do more. When we ran a survey, I think it's 2016, to the fan, and it was a global survey, and two big numbers came out that made us open our eyes. All the fans think, 66% of the fans think that we need to do more to attract new audiences. And that's the fan itself telling us this. And we have to hear and listen to what the fan needs to say to us. And then also we know that the brand is aging, or our fan base is aging. So we are conscious that we need to do much more to attract new fans.
This is, you say that the fan base is aging. This is...
Your subject?
Yeah, I'm an expert. Because you said the same, this is a problem in motorcycling in general. Motorcyclists look like me, old and overweight, and what we need is young people coming into the sport. So, I mean, literally, like, branding is the thing that I understand least. The thing that I understand is that we need to promote the sport. So, And it's
Right.
funny you said that the logo changed in, what was it, 2007? Because I started working in MotoGP in 2008. So it's been as long in the sport as me, which is a long time. But I mean, how do you appeal to young people? Can you do that with just a visual identity, or do you need to do so much more?
Right. First thing is first, the brand is reputation. So the visual part of it is just a tiny part.
Yeah.
The brand is everything. What we say we are and what is the people's perception of the brand, of the sport is. It is perception and is reputation as well.
Yeah.
So when the fan is telling us that we need to do more, that's something that the brand can solve as well. The exercise that we've done now is to do with the strategy too. We know that MotoGP is the most exciting sport on earth.
Yeah, 100%.
How do we show that? How do we transport this? How do we translate this into everything that we do? We need to tackle the brand proposition. We need to our messaging needs to all the things that we want to say. It needs to convey in the way we communicate, and that's nothing of the visual.
So you're talking about the
logo.
way you communicate with people, whether it's fans or businesses. It's also the visual side is a part, but also it's the language and the content as well. That's
right. Yes, if we want the brand to reflect who we are, and it needs to be fit for the digital age as well, then we need to analyze how we communicate with the fan, what we say we are, and then be true to everything that we want to say from here.
When you say it needs to fit with the digital age, I mean, I'm an internet journalist, been an internet journalist sort of all of my media career, but what do you mean?
We need to talk the language. Yeah. We need to know where are our audiences. We need to know our audiences and from which each platform, how we speak with the audience of social media, how we speak with our audience that reads our messages on the website. How do we speak with our audiences that follow MotoGP through broadcasting? And the same message needs to be spread differently for the different audiences.
Nuria, is there a transition period going on in Dorna? Because we see an American CCO and we see now a British head of marketing coming in. Have you seen this change inside Dorna Sports as moving more global?
I would say everything is related. The fact that we are rebranding on MotoGP has these new intentions, and we want to rebrand to appeal to new audiences, to strengthen the connection with the audiences, with the core fans that already follow us, and to attract new partners. Everything is related, isn't it? So if Liberty Media is also one of the partners that's going to help the sport expand. If we want to be go from a great racing event to a global entertainment brand, everything needs to accompany that.
Right.
Rebranding is just one tiny part of it. It's a monster task, but it's a tiny part of it. Everything else is important.
How do you attract new fans without losing old fans?
That's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest challenge. But in our case, 75 years of history. The core fan is there for us. We need to strengthen our connection with the core fan. So we cannot forget about the core fan, but also we need to do things to attract new generation of fans, to engage a new generation. So that's things that the rebranding is trying to solve. So not forgetting about the old fans and all the history, 75 years of history of the championship, but also do more to attract new fans. And we know that we are in digital era, not now, 10 years ago. So we're 10 years late, perhaps, on doing this.
Yeah. The other thing is that a lot of people say to me, you have to ride a motorcycle to be a MotoGP fan. And that, to me, seems like absolute nonsense because, as you said, it's the most exciting sport on earth. It should be attractive to lots and lots of people. So are you aimed at trying to transmit this? Is that the objective?
Absolutely, yes. Obviously, if we know the different audiences, they are the purists, the core fan, but there's a broader audience, the tourists, we would call them the tourists, that perhaps like football, other sports, we compete as a global entertainment brand. We need to compete to different sources of entertainment. Yeah. And we need to be appealing to people that maybe haven't touched, like you say, a bike in all their lives. It's not about only the feeling of riding and what these guys, the heroes that are on the track doing, what they do every weekend, do. They can, if you own a bike, perhaps you know about a little bit of this feeling. But when you see a race, but you haven't touched a bike and you see what they do on the track, it's amazing. Yeah. The close competition, the close racing, how they turn, the lean on the curves, all of this is appealing enough to people. Do they see the risks? Yeah. I think they do.
And also, I think they see like one of the most important things is they see the riders. The riders are sitting on top of the motorcycle, so you're seeing the rider do things. And
you
can't
aspect.
See their face. Yeah, exactly. You can't see the faces because basically, we should make everyone wear clear visors so we can see their eyes all the time. But you can't see the faces, but you can see their body. You can see, like how much effort they're doing, all the strange things that they're.
It's still athletics, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's yes. It's
the thing about branding for me that I've come to learn from you as well, Nuria, is that it's subconsciously, Dave, is something that it's there. We don't really realize it. The way that we kind of see MotoGP. I mean, are we mainly watching crash footage on social media, or the way that MotoGP are talking to us? How we kind of perceive the sport. I mean, do we look at a bike and think of Barry Sheene, or do we think of Marc Marquez or Valentino Rossi? If we walk around the track, how much fluorescent yellow is still there, even though the guy hasn't raced for 3 years? Yeah. There's all of this is quite sort of, when you start thinking about it deeply, it's quite complicated. And also, through our children, one of them is here today, he's 18, another one's coming tomorrow and he's nearly 16, how they comment on the sport and what they think about it and how they're engaged by it. Seeing Alex's face this morning, I mean, he was kind of buzzing, for want of a better word. He was like, I'm in a big environment here. There's a huge stage playing music and there's lots of people and there's lots of livery and lots of merchandise. It's, and I think...
there's a vibe.
Yeah, well, Dorna their job, like Nuria's job, is to take that kind of vibe from the circuits and try and transport it on a wider scale, and I guess this is part of it.
Going back to what David was just saying, don't you think that our children's generation in social media do show them more than a body in a helmet? Yeah. They follow their heroes. Yeah. They know them. Yeah. They know if they've been eating here, they've been going somewhere. If they've been training in a motocross track, and sometimes the names of the girlfriends. They know the faces. They know the humans, and that's really important because that's something that MotoGP family needs to achieve as well. And I think we're going there, is trying to be people-centric, fan-centric.
Formula One have done it.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, even talking about fans, it's not even something new, because I remember seeing Barry Sheene doing adverts for aftershave in the 1970s. He was massive because of his personality.
He was a brand.
He was a brand. Yeah, exactly. But you see this, like boxing, I think, is a similar sport where you see there are people. There'll be a Muhammad Ali, there'll be a Mike Tyson, and then there'll be another champion, and no one can remember what their name is or whatever. And they're amazing athletes maybe, but they're just not attractive in terms of their personality. The fact that there are still people wandering around here with, wearing yellow 46 gear tells you how important the personality is.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Rossi is a brand.
Yes.
You say you don't know much about brand, but you do.
Oh, God, don't make him feel even more important. He's another expert in something now.
I've talked to someone for 10 minutes.
That's something else. That's another part of what we're trying to achieve. If we know that we perhaps talk to brands, our B2B partners are within the sector of racing. Why? Why can we not talk to an aftershave brand? They should be attracted. I mean,
no, completely agree. Because like this to me is the biggest problem with the sport is the fact that most of our sponsors are related to the sport, and what you want are
endemic. They're endemic, aren't they?
Yes,
they have a
exactly.
connection already.
What you want is someone to come over here and try to sell dinner services or something because it's such a big deal.
Yeah. Nuria, just to sort of finish this off, I mean, the rebranding is a bigger project, something Dorna are doing on a much bigger scale. But for most people, the most visual part is the new logo type. You know, that was presented, or will be presented on Sunday night. You know, could you just tell us a little bit about how it looks the way it does? I mean, people are going to love it or hate it. Or not feel indifferent to
it. They're going to love it or hate it for about 10 minutes, and then they'll forget about it. It'll just become established, and they'll stop thinking about it.
Yeah, true.
It'll just be what it is.
There's a very easy brand principle, and well, I'll tell you about this. In branding, it is said that when the humans reject change.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. And so it's going to be a surprise. It's going to be a shock.
A transition.
And the MotoGP logo does not belong to the MotoGP organization anymore. It does belong to the fan. So you're giving something else to the fan that they are not expecting. So it's going to come as a big surprise. The only thing I can say in pro of the understanding of this, I mean, it's going to be probably lots of bad comments and hate. People doesn't like them to touch something that they love. We want to create a new love for something that is needed. If we don't, I mean, we know, talking about the shapes itself, that when it's applied in small sizes, it's too complex. Since we
the old logo, you mean?
The old logo.
Yeah.
Yes, it's got the checkered flag. It's got a compressed typography that is also in italic, and it doesn't show really well. It's not legible. It became an icon, and it's there. It's part of the history.
Yeah.
What the new one is trying to achieve is to reach new territories where MotoGP is not known. So it needs to be really readable, legible, and also recognizable, easy to understand, with also some of the principles of the sport, reflect some of the principles of the sport. But it needs to be appealing to a broader audience, not only racing audience. So we need. That's a bit of a clue, spoiling here. It's maybe losing the checkered flag.
I mean, this is not something that's been quickly whipped up on a computer inside Dorna offices. I mean, you work with a pretty sizable agency for this project.
Yes, we've been collaborating. The brand effort is being carried by Pentagram. Pentagram is one of the largest. They call themselves the largest independent studio in the world. It's a small design studios with the means of a big agency, and it's truly this. And we haven't talked to a client director. We talk to the creative director all the time. So it's been a pretty smooth and easy path with them.
They worked on some other big projects, right?
They have big clients. It first came to to me because Eurosport rebranded in 2016, and the team of Pentagram we've been working with led the rebrand of Eurosport, and quite a lot of parallels for what they were trying to achieve with the same. If we talk only about the artistic part of it, which is the logo type. But I would like maybe the audiences to understand, when we've conducted internal presentations within Dorna about the rebrand process, we have a slide with an iceberg. The icebergs have a part of the ice outside the surface and a big part that supports what's outside the surface of the water underneath. We've gone through everything. What's underneath supports what's visual. Yeah. So what's on the surface for an iceberg is the visual identity, what we see, and the way we speak. And on top of it, it would be the logo type. But then underneath the surface is who we are, what are our principles, what are our values. And all this will support the rest. So yes, the logo type has lean angle principles, close competition, geometry of wheels, man and machine. GP perhaps has a more sporty feel and the fluidity of the tracks, and also wants to show there is an acronym, not part of a word. So it's lots of things that ticks that it needs to fulfill.
Okay. Well, I guess we're going to be, maybe enjoying MotoGP in a slightly different way in years to come. It'd be interesting to see how Liberty, ferry this as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I always think that this sport deserves a bigger audience because it is such a fantastic sport. There's so many fantastic
Truly
people.
is.
Yeah, people involved with it, and more people should enjoy it. It should be compulsory to enjoy MotoGP. So I hope this helps.
Well, Nuria Garcia, Senior Brand Manager. There we go. I got your job title right. Thank you for spending us your time. I'll be cooking dinner for the next few nights, that's for sure.
Pleasure.
And best of luck with the unveil.
Thank you very much.